You guys remember that song? My Little Corner of the Room by Belle and Sebastian? That's what it feels like here. My little corner of the room. I'm going to mess with these lights a little. So welcome. Welcome, guys. Yeah, man. We're recording from my little corner of the room. Yeah, last week we had a little mishap with the episode. So that happened, and I recorded from my car, which was interesting. And I always allude to my husband. And this week's episode is going to be the lessons I've learned from my husband. So this episode is really for all my girlies in marriages and relationships where we can really learn to take what our husbands have to offer. So this episode is going to be slightly tricky because I want to be respectful of our relationship and of our privacy. I'm honoring what came in this week to post this episode because I know whenever I listen to those quiet pings, they always pay off. So I have a few main points of things that I learned from my husband, but as I go through those points, I'll give you some tidbits and some insight and sharing sort of luminosity behind all of those points. For those of you who haven't listened to the About Me episodes or the Woman Behind the Mask or my other sort of coming out episode, my husband and I met in the city in Manhattan. We lived both on 34th Street, and we had this very serendipitous meeting, but we remained friends. We literally didn't start dating until 12 or 13 years later. Is that right? 10 years would be 2007. I thought we did. Yeah, we didn't start dating until years later. And my husband was a real estate person, and I was a real estate person, and we would just communicate that way. I mean, after we had met in, 2006, we didn't communicate. He was older than me, so he didn't have Facebook. I had Facebook in like 2005, and he was older, so he didn't have it. So, like the parents had it, JK. He's not that much older, but I noticed him on Facebook years later. Years later, I was in a relationship and I said, "Oh, I know him." Friend request. And I guess he noticed that I didn't have pictures of me and my boyfriend and reached out to my colleague who was also, all in the real estate crew. And he did some diligence. It's a little real estate term for you guys if you didn't know, some due diligence. And he asked me out. And it's so funny when you're single in the city or you're in any city, if you're a single period and you're like, oh, you hear these stories about the fact that you may know your husband already. You have no idea who it could possibly be. So my husband and I started dating around my birthday in 2016. And he's an Aries rising, Capricorn sun, and I think he's a Sagittarius moon. And I am a Libra rising, Gemini sun, Gemini moon. And if you know anything about astrology, Capricorn and Gemini are complete opposites. It's 12 and 6. So it's December and June. So it's completely opposite. We function completely opposite. When I first met my husband for our first date, I was in an Uber going to, I think it was Chloe 81 in the Lower East Side. I had never been there. But he texts me, he's like, this place is packed. And I'm like, this is not the vibe I'm going for. Like got like really kind of pissed off. And I get there and he is the only person sitting at the bar. And I was like, all right, that was smooth. I'll give it to you. He definitely had me laughing. But when I went to go speak with him and get to know him, he was just like, for me, like I wear everything on my sleeve. He holds it a little more close to the vest. And that is really where the first lesson comes in. And I was looking for him like on our first date. I'm like, where are you? I can't. I'm like asking him questions. I'm like, oh, you're so formal, you know? So there's something about his stoicism. I mentioned this in a previous episode about the colleague that he reached out to that I was working with. He referred to Jason as stone face in a business context. And I was like, oh, he's like, you should be more stone faced like Jason. And I'm like, yeah, I know. But something that really grounded me about my husband was his level of stoicism. And what I was reading was that there was a neurologist out of Zurich that's saying that the brain doesn't burn out from stress. It burns out from emotional overthinking. That is me. You know, when we're stressed, when we're physically stressed, right? So we're like working out, we're moving something, we're tired, that's a physical stressor. If I think back to the times where I struggled the most, it was really the times where I was emotionally responding to a trigger that maybe wasn't there, right? Test anxiety. I always had test anxiety. And it really is this emotional response to an outcome. Like, I'm not good enough. I'm not going to be good enough. Like getting in your head about these emotional things. What are these people are going to think of me? And Jay really doesn't fall into that category of people. I'm going to talk a little bit about human design this week. If you guys aren't familiar with human design, you can easily go find your human design makeup if you just Google human design chart and pop in your information. But I am a sacral authority, which means that I know if something is right or wrong based on my gut. Like my first instinct, I know if it's right or if it's wrong. Jay has a splenic authority, which means he has very good instincts, which I think attributes to his confidence, to his innate confidence. You know, he separates his emotions from his actions. So even though he may not want to do something, he does something because he knows that it is right. And this leads me into a second lesson that I've learned from him is that he grew up with a difficult childhood and he always made things right. He didn't make great decisions as a kid, but he recognized the decisions and he made them right. And once he was able to see the decisions that weren't right, he just doesn't make those decisions anymore. He's not perfect, but he learned from the decision and he learned from the consequence and the way it made him feel. And then not only just didn't not do it, but actually made it right. And in a way that no one else could see. No, he wasn't getting credit for making it right, but he made it right. And, you know, that's what you got to do. You got to make things right the best way you know how and take that personal level of accountability. I remember sitting in my husband's apartment for the first time alone. He was in Miami on, I don't remember what it was, Summit at Sea, but it wasn't a Summit at Sea. It was like on land. Summit on land. It's like for creative entrepreneurs and professionals that have money to blow and network with other creative entrepreneurs and professionals. And I don't mean to be a hater. I would totally have spent money on that. I was in corporate though and had no business. But when I sat in his apartment by myself, I was so impressed by the meticulous level of ownership that he had for his life. And I hadn't had that. I just wasn't as responsible. And ladies, like when you are with a man who, you know, many times the woman is like the responsible one sometimes, you know, but he really had this sense of groundedness, safety, security, stability that I always use the analogy of like, I'm the kite and he's the rock that I'm attached to. Relationships are not easy all the time. They're not. And if they are, you're probably not growing or paying attention to it. Or you're just getting swept away in the busyness of life, which I get. I'm not judging. And it feels great to have a partner that stands by you through all that time. But when you're really working on yourself, your relationships start to make some noise because you're showing up differently in your relationships and you expect more and you expect different things out of your relationships. So the reason that I bet on my husband was because of that level of groundedness that he provided me. There was a level of stability, a level of accountability, a level of, I'm not going to drop the ball in a way that really hurts us. And I had dated, you know, a few guys quite seriously towards the end of, you know, being in my early 30s and really looking to settle down. And both the relationships that I'm thinking of did not fit the bill for me because I did not feel that level of accountability. And yeah, there were other things that were great, but it didn't make me feel safe. So I think the level of safety is extremely important, that you ultimately choose this person to be your life partner. You want to feel safe. And as you grow into your relationship and all the cute, sexy things that you thought were amazing, are no longer cute and sexy, they're annoying, comes my third lesson. And if you know Jason, you know that he is extremely thoughtful and generous. And this is the part where I'm like, you're being too generous. It's too much. It's coming at the expense of your physical health, your energy. We're giving things to people that maybe aren't appreciating them. And it took me a really long time to not get a little angry, especially in the beginning of our marriage, where I felt like he was really extending himself in ways where I was not. And I think, first of all, this lesson comes from the fact that my parents were very thrifty. And they both came from no money. My father was the oldest of 7 boys. He had to fight to get food from on the table. Like if you didn't eat right away, if you didn't grab your food and eat, you didn't eat. And I was spoiled in that respect. Like I think my parents wanted to provide me everything they didn't have. So I was spoiled and I did really take for granted certain luxuries that I was afforded. And because I was not recognizing the value of those things because I was just given them and I wasn't as thoughtful. I think one of the biggest things that I learned from my husband was how to be thoughtful and how to be generous with people and extend yourself to people in ways that maybe they're not extending themselves to you, but you hold the standard for yourself. So, while I would be getting mad at him, like you're treating X, Y, and Z this way, but they're not treating you the same way. Well, he's like, well, this is how I know that I can reciprocate something. Like there's love in my heart that I want to give. And that's definitely the most valuable thing. Other than just like this straight up groundedness and stability that my husband provides, is this level of thoughtfulness and generosity. It's like so stunning how generous my husband is and has been with my family, with me, with my friends. There was a Harvard study that was done. I think it started in the late 30s and ended in like 2018. And it was a study of community, how community and belonging and reciprocity and generosity really creates health. And that loneliness actually is more detrimental than smoking or alcoholism. And through this journey of how to heal and self-care and spirituality and learning my form of connection to the divine and what I really value and following in this path of I want to help people learn how to take care of themselves and take care of others and feel good. Like feel fucking good. It's too much to not feel good for so long. It's too much. And through that journey, it can get very lonely because you see people in your life where you're like, that ain't it. And you drop friends. And you know what? I'm proud of myself for dropping that person that made me feel this way or that didn't appreciate me or whatever the reasoning was. But it almost can get a little addictive where you're like, oh, well, they always say the people that you surround yourself with, the 5 people that you surround yourself with the most have the most influence, like is how your life is going to look. And for me, at least, 5 people, there's a lot of people. It's a lot of people. I tend to skew to let me do this on my own because I'm really not liking the way I'm seeing other people do it. And what I'm realizing, especially from Jason, is that he has such a large community of people around him. And do they all fit? He always says to me, you have different friends for different things. And I value that because I think that we have to remember that when we are in community is when we are able to be in it, in the existence of life, in the motion, like we are forward moving. We're not like sitting back reflecting, and figuring out how we're going to move forward. We are actually moving forward. The generosity piece, the piece of tending, where I was going with this is, as one of the points of like the things that annoyed me was that he was always tending to these relationships where I was like, there's no reciprocity here. Like, what are you doing? It actually can be a form of self-care to tend to relationships in ways that are artful to you and are thoughtful and are generous and are loving without the expectation of receiving something in return. That's the most important caveat. So yeah, I did get permission to record this episode before I did because I don't want hubby seeing his name thrown out there in the ethers without him knowing I was recording it. But again, just as a final note, when you do self-reflection on this level, in this depth, in the real taking off the masks, ego deaths, reevaluating what you want, it can be very scary to be in relationship because you don't know how the other person is going to react to the changes. And you don't know how you're going to react. And I think sometimes what stops a lot of people from really doing the work is that they're scared that their life is going to fall apart as they know it. But if we're really doing good work, our life may fall apart as we know it, but we'll always fall into an even better version for our truest, authentic selves. So that's it, guys. I love you. I'll see you next week.